There's a quiet fear that almost nobody talks about honestly, yet nearly everyone feels. It's the fear of getting to retirement and realizing you don't have enough. Not just not enough in a mathematical sense, but that deeper, more unsettling question: did I do this right? Did I save enough? Did I sacrifice too much or not enough? After more than 2 decades working as a financial advisor, sitting across from real people, not spreadsheets, not theories, I can tell you something that might surprise you. Most people aren't telling the truth about their retirement. Not because they're bad people, not because they're trying to deceive you, but because money, especially in retirement, is deeply personal. It's tied to identity, pride, and sometimes even regret. So when your neighbor says they retired comfortably, when your uncle casually mentions he's doing just fine, when your former boss talks about hitting some impressive number, take it with caution, because I've seen the real numbers. And today, I want to walk you through what's actually happening, so you don't end up chasing a number that may not even matter, while quietly sacrificing the years of life that matter most. The fear that drives everything. Let's start with something important. According to research from Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest fears retirees have isn't boredom, it isn't health, it's running out of money. In fact, about 60% of people believe they will run out of money during their lifetime. Just pause on that for a second. More than half of people, after decades of working, saving, planning, still feel uncertain about whether it will be enough. And when you feel that way, your behavior changes. You save more aggressively, you spend less, even when you could afford to enjoy life. You delay experiences, you postpone joy. And sometimes you unknowingly trade the most vibrant years of your later life for a number that was never truly necessary. So instead of operating from fear, let's look at reality, what people actually have saved. When we talk about retirement, people often throw around big, intimidating numbers. But let's ground this in real data. According to studies from organizations like the Employee Benefit Research Institute and the Federal Reserve, the picture looks very different from what most people assume. Nearly 80% of people have less than $100,000 saved in retirement accounts. And even more striking, about half of those people have nothing saved at all in formal retirement accounts like 401ks or IRAs. Now that might sound alarming at first, but here's where context matters. Retirement isn't just about what's in your account. It's about your total financial picture. Net worth tells a bigger story. When we zoom out and look at net worth, which includes savings, investments, and home equity, we get a clearer view. For people aged 55 to 64, the median household net worth is around $365,000. For those aged 65 to 74, it rises slightly to about $410,000. Then, later in life, it tends to decline again to roughly $335,000. That pattern is actually very normal. In the early years of retirement, many people are still growing their assets or drawing from them slowly. But over time, spending naturally increases, especially with healthcare, and assets begin to decline. This isn't failure. This is how retirement is designed to work. What about the wealthy retirees? Now you might be wondering, what about the people who are really doing well? Let's look at the upper tiers. According to data highlighted by Kiplinger, the top 25% of households have around $1.2 million in net worth. The top 10% are closer to $3 million. So yes, those numbers exist, but they are not the norm. They are the exception. And this is where perspective becomes powerful. If you're constantly comparing yourself to the top 10%, you'll almost always feel behind, even if you're doing just fine. A factor most people ignore, but changes everything. There's one factor that quietly but dramatically impacts retirement outcomes, and it's not investment strategy, it's not income level, it's not even timing the market. It's relationship structure. Long-term studies like the National Longitudinal Study of Youth show something fascinating. Married couples tend to have significantly higher assets. Remarried individuals have less. Divorced individuals have far less. Those who never married often have the lowest accumulation. Why? Because partnership changes everything. Two incomes, shared expenses, emotional support, long-term stability. It's not just about money, it's about structure. And while life doesn't always go according to plan, understanding this dynamic helps explain why outcomes can differ so widely between people who, on the surface, seem similar. The hidden power of a simple plan. Now here's something that often gets overlooked, but might be one of the most powerful insights of all. People who have a written financial plan tend to have about 27% more wealth than those who don't. That's not a small difference, that's life-changing. And yes, part of that is behavior. People who plan tend to be more intentional. But there's something deeper at play. Clarity creates confidence. When you know where you're going, when you understand your numbers, when you can see how your future unfolds, you make better decisions. You worry less, you react less emotionally, you stay consistent. And consistency over time is what builds financial security, not perfection. The role of Social Security, often underestimated. Now let's talk about something many people overlook or underestimate: Social Security Administration benefits. As of early 2025, the average monthly Social Security check is around $1,976, or roughly $24,000 per year. For couples, that number can be significantly higher. And while it may not sound like a lot, it plays a critical role. In many cases, Social Security covers a meaningful portion of basic living expenses, reducing the pressure on your personal savings. And the timing matters. Claim early, age 62, and your benefit is reduced. Wait until full retirement age, around 67, and you receive 100%. Delay until age 70, and your benefit increases significantly. This decision alone can reshape your entire retirement strategy. The million-dollar myth. Let's address the elephant in the room. That idea that you must have $1 million to retire. It sounds nice. It's a clean number, easy to remember, but it's not reality. Research shows that only about 3% of Americans actually reach $1 million in retirement savings. And yet, millions of people still retire, still live, still find satisfaction. So the real question isn't, can I reach $1 million? It's, what kind of life do I actually want, and what does that require? The trap most people don't see coming. There's a pattern I saw over and over again during my years advising clients, and it didn't just affect people who were struggling financially. In fact, it often showed up most clearly in people who were doing very well. According to research from Goldman Sachs, a surprising number of people across all income levels are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, you might expect that among lower income households. And yes, for those earning under $50,000, it's incredibly common. Life is simply more difficult at that level. But here's where it gets interesting. Even among people earning $100,000 to $200,000 per year, about 25% are still living paycheck to paycheck. And it doesn't stop there. Among those earning $300,000 to over $500,000 annually, roughly 40% are still in that same cycle. Think about that. People making $500,000 a year, still feeling financial pressure, still not building meaningful savings, still stuck. So what's going on? It comes down to one simple but powerful principle. Lifestyle expands to match income. The more you earn, the easier it becomes to justify spending more. A better house, a nicer car, more frequent travel, more comfort. And none of those things are wrong. But when spending rises as fast or faster than income, progress disappears. That's why, if I had to boil everything down into one foundational rule, it would be this. No matter how much you earn, you must consistently spend less than you make. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, consistently. Because the gap between what you earn and what you spend, that gap is your future. The simplicity most people overcomplicate. Over the years, I've found that people often look for complex strategies. They want the perfect investment, the ideal timing, the secret advantage. But the truth is, wealth is usually built on very simple habits, repeated over time. If I had to summarize it, I'd say there are 3 guiding principles. Spend less than you earn, be intentional about your biggest financial commitments, protect stability in your life structure. Sometimes I jokingly say it like this: 1 house and 1 spouse. It sounds lighthearted, but there's truth behind it. Because the biggest financial decisions you make aren't your daily coffee purchases. They're your housing choices, your relationships, your long-term commitments. And those decisions tend to shape your financial life far more than any investment ever will. How much do you actually need? Now we arrive at one of the most important and misunderstood questions. How much is enough? You've probably heard the rule before. You need about 80% of your pre-retirement income to live comfortably. It sounds logical, but when we look at real-world data, it doesn't quite hold up. Again, drawing from research by Goldman Sachs, something interesting shows up. People who replace 50% to 80% of their pre-retirement income report very similar levels of satisfaction. In other words, someone living on 60% of their former income often feels just as content as someone living on 80%. That challenges a major assumption, because it suggests that beyond a certain point, more income doesn't necessarily create more happiness in retirement. Why? Because many expenses naturally decline. You're no longer commuting every day. You may have paid off your home. You're not saving for retirement anymore. You're living it. Your life shifts, and with it, your spending patterns shift too. The quiet role of contentment. There's something deeply human about retirement that no spreadsheet can fully capture. It's not just about income, it's about rhythm, it's about time, it's about waking up without urgency, spending your day with intention, reconnecting with things that matter. And for many people, that transition brings a surprising realization. They don't need as much as they thought they would, not because they're settling, but because their priorities have changed. A perspective that might surprise you. There's a powerful piece written in the Wall Street Journal by Andrew Biggs, a former leader within the Social Security Administration, and his findings challenge some of the biggest fears people carry into retirement. He points out that many retirees who describe themselves as comfortable have savings between $50,000 and $250,000. Now, is that ideal for everyone? No, but it reveals something important. Comfort doesn't always come from hitting massive financial milestones. It often comes from alignment between your resources and your lifestyle, between what you have and how you choose to live. The power of Social Security revisited. Another key insight from his research is the role of guaranteed income. For many retirees, Social Security provides a stable financial foundation. In fact, a typical retired couple may receive around $46,000 per year in benefits. That alone can cover a substantial portion of essential expenses. And here's the critical part. That income arrives before you even touch your personal savings, which means your savings don't have to carry the full burden. They act more like a supplement, providing flexibility, not survival. The question you should really be asking. So instead of asking, do I have enough? A better question might be, what kind of life do I want to live? And what does that realistically require? Because chasing a number without understanding your life, that's how people end up oversaving and underliving. They delay retirement longer than necessary. They hesitate to spend even when they're financially secure. They carry anxiety into years that were meant to feel free. Don't trade the best years without realizing it. There's a phrase I often come back to. Don't trade the youth of your senior years for a number you don't truly need. Because time is the one resource that doesn't compound. You can always earn more money. You can adjust your plan. You can shift your lifestyle. But you cannot get time back. And for many people, the most active, healthy, fulfilling years of retirement happen earlier than they expect. Those are the years where travel feels easier, where energy is higher, where experiences feel more accessible. And those years are incredibly valuable. So what's the truth about retirement? It's not a single number. It's not a universal formula. It's not something you can copy from someone else. It's a balance between preparation and presence, between discipline and enjoyment, between security and freedom. Yes, saving matters. Yes, planning matters. But so does living. So does understanding what truly brings you satisfaction. So does designing a life, not just funding one. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's this. You don't need perfection to have a good retirement. You don't need to hit every milestone. You don't need to match someone else's numbers. What you need is clarity. Clarity about your life. Clarity about your values. Clarity about what enough actually means for you. Because once you have that, everything else becomes a lot simpler.